welcome back to my channel. This is Maria once again, and today we're going to be talking about yarn to kind of finish off our crochet tool. Like things we need to have in order to crochet. I would think yarn is pretty high up there. So let's talk about it. So here I have, I'm going to start with what we call lace crochet. And lace crochet is actually almost like thread, and it actually is called crochet thread. And it does make beautiful, beautiful work. It is very, very thin, and it's almost like a heavy thread, if you will. And you will use the smallest of hooks to work with this. Like for example, the 2.5 or 225 that I have here. This will be the type of crochet hook, if you can see there how tiny that is, that you would use in order to do lace crochet. Lace crochet is probably more traditional crochet. It's probably what your great-great-grandmother used to do crochet with. And you know, it really does make these beautiful, intricate works of art, like your doilies and certain baby clothes. I know like there's a lot of christening clothes and things of like that nature. You know, that are made with that type of work. I have here a little sample of it using this very same thread. As you can see here, you know, this is very, very intricate, very lacy, and it makes for beautiful, beautiful works of art. And it most reminds me of my grandmother, and you know, she was the one that got me into crochet in the first place. So, yes, so this is, and I'm going to show you the label. The label here, it says classic crochet thread, and there are different sizes in crochet thread. This size 10 is what you have probably most run into. There is a size 20. I believe there's also a size 18. And the higher the number, the thinner the thread. So if you keep that in mind. There's a size 3 that's a little bit thicker than that. I would say that the 3 is kind of like some of the other yarns I'll be talking about here soon. But this one actually has a very different type of label, and as you can see, there's all the doilies that people can create with it. It is very specific, and it is certainly a little bit more difficult, I would say. I would not start off with lace crochet for sure. I would start off with a thicker yarn and, you know, get more comfortable with it before I would move on. Now, aside from crochet thread, you are going to have, you know, different sizes. So like crochet thread has the sizes 3, 10, 18, 15, 20, you know, etc. You know, from there, we move on to sizes 1 through, I mean, I've seen them as like size 9s, right? So your size 1s, I have here, this is a size 1. This is mostly used for lace work. It can be used for lace work as well. There's very little, I mean, it's almost the same, but it's not, right? So if you can see that, it's a little bit thicker, right? But not too much thicker, right? But you know, this is what people would make socks with. They'll knit some socks together. And you know, they'll use these types of hooks. Oh, maybe a little bit bigger than this, but they'll use those smaller sized hooks to work with this yarn. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about labels, because aside from the crochet thread, the labels are kind of important to note. So if you can see here, there's the size that says, you know, size 1. Yeah. So, and then there is the recommended hook and needle for knitting needles sizes. Here, these icons there, I don't know if you can see that, those icons there they signal how you are going to wash and dry and do all kinds of things. And you know, you can search online for what those mean. I'll leave a link in the description as well for you to take a look at what those mean. And you know, some yarns will have more specific instructions when it comes to washing your projects and the work that you give away for gifts. You know, you got to make sure you let them know those specific things, okay? So this here is a gauge. So what this means is that using the recommended 3.5 millimeter size E4 hook, if you do a 4-inch by 4-inch square, okay, or if you do a block of work with your yarn here, it should measure this many single crochets, right? So it should be 36 rows with 26 single crochets across. So that's kind of an important piece that I don't think a lot of people talk about. I know that I had trouble kind of figuring that out. Same thing for knitting. So if you're a knitter, this is the recommended hook sizes, or sorry, recommended needle sizes, and also a gauge that is very specific to knitting. The next thing that you're going to want to look at is, you know, that it'll say the color in here. So if I can look that up here, they say this one says neon pink. So it'll say the color, right? And then down here, if you notice, there's this number, 7725. That's called a lot number. And a lot number is signaling a dye lot. So the different types of dye used to create this yarn and the patterns of that dye have a very specific lot number. And when you buy your yarn, you want to try to match those numbers. So like, say for example, if you're buying, you know, 4 skeins, this is a skein or ball of yarn, you want to make sure that those lot numbers are the same, so that when you are continuing your work and you're attaching that yarn to the end of the previous ball or skein, the colors kind of flow naturally the way that they were supposed to. So that's an important part of the labels for your yarn. Here you're going to see that it's measured in yards or meters. So you'll see that number there, yards, meters. It's going to tell you how many yards are in a skein or a ball or a cake. We'll talk about all those in a minute. And it's going to tell you how many ounces or grams. It's also going to tell you what the blend is, so what kind of fabric is being used to create this. This is acrylic and nylon. So, you know, acrylic is of course man-made, and as you can see, this is, you know, obviously it's wool-free. So, you know, these kinds of yarn are perfect for socks because they don't really shrink much when you wash them, right? So, so it'll tell you what, you know, sometimes it'll be 100% acrylic, or it'll be, you know, 100% wool, or 100% cotton, or maybe it's a blend of 80% cotton, et cetera, right? So you will want to take a look at that, and sometimes that will determine your laundry instructions, right? So those are the different parts of a label, and I wanted to make sure that I went through that in depth, because, you know, I had questions with that when I first started myself. So this is a size 1 yarn. Up from that is a size 2, and as you can see here, this is a size 2. Here are your laundry and drying instructions, or launder instructions. Again, you see the crochet hook and the knitting needles blocks or gauge for a block gauge that I was talking about. This is 36 rows with 26 single crochets across. And as you can see, the difference between the size 1 and the size 2 is very, very slight. there's hardly, it's almost identical, right? It's almost identical. There's hardly really a change there, if you can see that. But it is a little bit bigger, just a little bit bigger, right? So again, you will see that in the labels, you'll have your gauge, you'll have your number or your size here, you'll have your launder instructions, you'll see the colors in here, and you'll see the dye lot. This one happens to be 5232. So just keep in mind that those are the important parts of a label when you're going to buy some yarn. Specifically, if a pattern calls for a specific size or, you know, a certain yardage, you'll want to know, you know, the yard or a specific type of, you know, type of fiber. So you'll want to know what those are. So this is a size 2. And then combing up from there, this, as you can see, these are skeins of yarn, and they could be this, they could be small like this, they can be big like this, right? And I'll get into this a little bit, but they could be big like that, right? But they look kind of the same as kind of like this elongated tube, if you will, right? Whereas a cake is actually a cake. It looks like a cake, right? So, this one here is a size 3, and as you can see, here is the label for that, and you can see the hook size, the knitting needle size. Again, it's going to give you the gauge, so you're looking at 13 single crochets with, what is that, 16 rows, and it should measure that 4x4, right? So this is here's your launder instructions. This is your color. Now, one thing that I will say is that usually, this one has one, but usually solid colors, right, do not have a dye lot number. So this one has one, some of them do, but most of the time, if they're a solid color, they're not going to have a dye lot because you're not trying to match them, right? That's pretty much how it works. You're not trying to match different colors. So there's no real need for a dye lot. This one does have one, but again, there's no need for it. And of course, you'll see here, this is 7 ounces. It's 392 yards in a cake. This is a cotton blend. Okay, so it is 50% cotton and 50% polyester. So very, very soft, nice yarn. Again, this is a size 3, and I'm going to show you how much thicker that is in comparison to a 2. So if you can see that, it is quite thicker. Right? And then, from there, we can move on to the most common of sizes, which is 4. Size 4, they call it your worsted yarn or your medium yarn, is the most common. This is by Red Heart. As you can see here, here's the information that you need. So here's your 10 by 10 centimeters or 4 by 4 inches for crochet and knitting. This is your gauge block. This is your size. You'll see that this one says no dye lot because it's a solid color. So when it's variegated or specialty colors that are all mixed in, etc., you'll see that dye lot there. So keep that in mind. So if you don't see no dye lot, don't be scared about that. That's supposed to happen. So as you can see, here's the color. You'll see also, this is 100% acrylic. So Red Heart does make quite a lot of acrylic fiber. So it'll tell you that much. If I come down here, you'll see that this is 315 yards, 6 ounces, and this is quite a bit thicker than your size 3. So if you can see that there, It is quite thicker. Okay, and then moving on from there, we have the size 5. And again, you will see that the difference here, right? So this one seems to be a little bit more flaky. It's a different type of fiber. It's certainly a nicer, softer, very nice red heart. Makes a good yarn in this one. I really like this. It's one of my favorites actually for like sweaters or scarves, etc., etc. This is a great yarn. And this is a size 5. They call it the bulky yarn. Again, you have your gauge blocks, launder instructions, 70% acrylic, 30% nylon. And then you have your yardage, your ounces and yardage and meters here, grams, meters. And you will have, for example, here, I'll talk about this a little bit. You'll see that it'll come with a pattern. Some labels do have a pattern. So when you open them up, I'll go ahead and open this one. When you open them up, some of them will have that pattern written out, and that's always great. You get to be able to kind of dive right in. So once you learn your basics, and trust me, I'll have that series for you here in a bit, you'll be able to make these things. And as you can see, this pattern specifically calls for knitting needles. So this is a knit pattern. And it calls for 6 balls or 6 skeins. And as you can see, this is nice and thick, very nice yarn. It's kind of fluffy, right? But it is considerably thicker than the size 4. Okay, so moving on from that, we have the size 6. And size 6 is your super bulky. So size 6, again, here's your gauge, your launder instructions. Again, this one probably has no dye lot because none is needed. Oh no, call me a liar, it does have a lot number. But, like I said, if you don't find a lot number in a solid color, it's meant to be that way. But everything that you need to know, again, on the label here, it probably does have a pattern. And it also has, the ounce, grams, yards, and meters. And, this is obviously quite thicker than the 5, right? So if I put those side to side, you'll see that it is quite thicker. So this is your size 6 bulky yarn. Put that over here. And, obviously from here, and I don't have a 7, there is a 7, I don't have that type of yarn. I don't use it very often, but a lot of people love to use that for home ec projects, kind of like some people make crochet curtains, rugs, etc., etc. The size 7, 8, even 9s I've seen do have that available. There's all kinds of yarn sizes, all kinds of fibers, from the organic ones to 100% merino wool, which is straight from the sheep basically. And it's a great great yarn to use. I actually do love merino wool. You can use cashmere and alpaca and all that kind of stuff. So and what's great about that is that it's a sustainable thing, because you're not injuring these animals. You're basically giving them a haircut. Right? So, but that pretty much tells you everything that you need to know about yarn. And again, I will reference the yarn I'm using. I will go over the labels that I'm using in my projects. I'll go over the hooks that I'm using in my projects, both in millimeter and US, and kind of let you know everything that you need to know in regards to any of the projects that I'm making, as well as provide written instructions for my patterns. I hope you found this tutorial kind of informational and educational, and please like it, and let me know if you have any questions. Leave them down below. I'll be sure to answer best I can, and we'll see you next time. Thanks.